Good evening, and I was going to say happy Shabbat, but I'm not sure it is one, particularly throughout the United States and worldwide. It is, as BB said in the chat room, looking like a war zone out there. And this is an extraordinary decline of not only conditions in the United States, but the world. I would not have thought it would be possible that this many years prior to Yahweh's return, here we are in 2020, 13 years before he returns with Dode, that we would be witnessing these kind of events. But look at the world. In California, where you are, Kirk, fires of unprecedented, massiveness. You've got the second and third largest fire in recorded history of California.
Right. Correct.
Massive, uncontrolled fires.
There's not enough money to fight them. Even if you're fighting them, there's not enough money to fight them. No, because you went broke with the idiotic approach to coronavirus. Exactly.
And there are mega storms. The hurricane, Class 4, Category 4, that just banged into Louisiana and part of Texas, was the most violent storm to hit that region ever. Mega riots and protests. Black lives are worthless, obviously, is the name that they should be using, because not only is Black Lives Matter turned into a riotous organization, not only are they a political con organization that claims that Black Lives Matter, and they do nothing for the black community. They're not willing to even enter into discussion about the fact that black men are 80% more likely to commit violent crime than a Caucasian. They don't want to enter into conversation that says that 93% of the time that a black is killed is by another black. They don't want to talk about the fact that when a white person kills, that the overwhelming preponderance of the time, some 96% of the time, that a Caucasian is engaged in a murder, a homicide. The victim is white. 96% of the time. Whites aren't out killing, stalking blacks. If a Caucasian kills somebody, they're killing another white person. It's the opposite of what Black Lives Matter is protesting. But if a black person kills someone, the majority of the time, if it's an interracial killing, it's a white. There are reasons, and I don't want to get into them, that blacks are stalking whites and killing them. The other way around. So there is indeed a racial element to murder, but not on behalf of Caucasians, on behalf of blacks. Those are the facts. But this organization doesn't want to discuss the fact. As a matter of fact, they're calling facts, evidence and reason, white propaganda. That evidence and reason and statistics are tools of the white elite, and therefore they cannot be used. We have reached a point of dumbing down America to the point that most Americans are thoughtless. You've got sports stars and league owners that are scrambling to sympathize with Black Lives Matter while these people push to destroy everything America represents, sponsor riots and looting, start a race war, and worse, a class war. It is looking like a war zone out there. We brought this on ourselves.
You know, that might explain some of my, I won't go into too much personal stuff, but that might explain some of the situations that I'm experience, and I am a major client of a company for a particular reason, and they employ a lot of black people. And when they complain, they dismiss me completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I get punished for it.
Yeah, and all you're doing is asking them to show up on time.
To do the job. Yeah, show
and
up
do
on
their
time,
job.
do the job that we're required to do. Not even all their stuff. They have a long list of stuff. I just have you have inside, you know what I'm talking about, but there's a long list of things that they offer. I ask them to do really one particular thing, and other than, two particular things. They don't require more than about over a 12-hour shift, maybe 5 minutes per hour, and then you can watch TV, and I can't get it done.
Yeah, if you complain to them that they're not showing up on time, they're leaving you shorthanded, and that they're not willing to do their job, and then you're belligerent, and you're badgering them and causing an incident. So none of them will show up.
Yeah, but let me tell you, that's right, because it spreads around to all the employees, all the workers. So there's one other thing that I mentioned to a
you use
third
workers
party.
and quotes, right? They're paycheck receivers. They're paycheck receivers.
Well, here's the point. I actually dismissed one. I said, if you're that unhappy and the company has told me they want you to withdraw, I said, fine, don't wait, go now. And then I get the report on everything that happens, and the report was that they billed the builders for 12 hours. They participated in 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Which they did nothing.
No, they did. They weren't there. They
weren't
there, and they still charged as if they were. And I told the company, and they said that can't be right. And I told anyway, it's just I'm flabbergasted.
Yeah. America is burning. America is burning, and liberal Americans are fanning the flames of it. Conservative Americans are slightly better on this issue, but not a lot, because the reason we're in this problem is something that I have screamed as shrilly as I possibly can at the top of my voice for now 20 years. The U.S. military and the U.S. Justice Department, police in general, as well as all of the federal agencies, are out of control. Police are way too aggressive. They've been way too aggressive for a very long time. And so there are about 1,000 police killings every year. And that's way too many. And while more whites than blacks are killed by police each year, there are more blacks killed per capita by police than there are whites per capita, but the ratio of whites to blacks being killed by police is still way under the percentage of violent crime and murders perpetrated by blacks, which is the reason they're being killed by police. They're being pursued for violent crimes. But the fact is that we have protected police. We have almost worshiped police, as the first responders and honoring them, when we should have been exposing and condemning them for their dishonesty, for their arrogance, for their belligerence around people, for their attitude, for their willingness to shoot. And of course, the thing that blew up this week was when Jacob Blake was shot, I think it was 7 times in the back. He's now paralyzed. And if you watch the video, you'll say, what in the hell is that cop doing? Of course, there is more to the story. Jacob Blake was involved in an altercation in a bar not too long ago, where he brandished a gun when the police were called to resolve the incident, he would not surrender his gun, and he hit a cop, resisted arrest, and fled. The crime was not prosecuted because none of the witnesses had the character to testify. And without any witnesses willing with the character to testify as to what had happened, there you go. And that's one of the great problems of the African American community as to why violence is out of control, is they are acting like the military, acting like the cops that they seem to despise, and won't speak out against one another when someone conducts a crime, and so they're placing themselves in a hellish situation as nothing is ever resolved. He was then involved in a domestic abuse situation, sexual assault. A warrant was out for his arrest for sexual assault. And that day that he was shot, the cops were responding to a domestic dispute. And Jacob Blake walked out with a knife. The cops tried to get him to surrender because, well, he had a warrant out for his arrest, a serious crime, felony. And he wouldn't surrender the knife. He wouldn't surrender to the cops. And he wouldn't, he was just belligerent. And so they tased him. They used non-lethal force. He survived the tasing, pulled the tasers out, and continued to flee with the knife. Obviously, he did want to be arrested because of the felony
outstanding warrant. Yeah.
Outstanding warrant. And so as he is walking to the car, the police are trying to grab his shirt, trying to do everything to subdue him, trying to take the knife away from him. He's continuing to resist arrest. He's continuing to hold the knife. He even gets into the car with children in the back, wielding the knife. But those on the left don't want you to consider the facts. Now, I think the cop was out of his ever-loving gourd to shoot the man once, much less 7 times. I think it was stupid. It just shows that, again, cops are way too aggressive. But this was not a good man behaving himself. And, somebody will say, we don't have to earn the right to live. You don't have to be perfect to have rights not to be shot. No. The fact of the matter is, if you're wielding a knife and you have a warrant out for your arrest for sexual assault, and you have fled even after having been tased, and jump into the back of a car, resisting arrest where there's children, holding a knife, bad stuff is going to happen. Yeah, they call it suicide by cop. Of course, in this guy's Facebook page, he had cops with their faces changed to those of pigs. A bad man. I think the cop that shot him was an idiot. I think that, I'd much prefer cops not have deadly force, not have guns. Much prefer that. And in this case, he had gotten away. They knew who he was. Get him under different circumstances. Don't shoot him in the back. Not 3 times like this. Terrible. Terrible, terrible mistake. But this is a horrible individual. This individual is no better than George Floyd. In George Floyd's case, maybe he's even worse because he was a drug addict.
A pretty bad dude.
And a man that pistol whipped a woman who he was robbing. But, stop complaining. You're being shot. Start acting in a responsible way. Well, in addition to mega fires and mega storms and mega riots and protests, we have a mega virus, worse than anything we've experienced in the modern era. We have mega floods in many places throughout Europe and in China, threatening entire dams, entire communities. We have mega locusts, the worst locust swarms of recorded history. We have the largest worldwide and domestic imposition of control and deprivation of freedom in the history of the world over this virus. Haven't saved a life, but they certainly have put together the apparatus for worldwide control. And keep in mind in this regard, well, I've been saying this for some time. Edward Snowden came out the other day and he says, in the NSA community, they're using this as their means of mass surveillance and control of the population. Bring into that the worst economic collapse of all time. The only reason that people don't recognize they're in the greatest depression ever is because they're just too brainwashed, too ignorant. And they have this sense of entitlement. A good friend of mine was over the other day, and he was bemoaning the fact that the governor of these islands did what so many of the idiot governors have done across the continental United States. And he shut down people's freedoms and businesses. It's going to be a realization that at least a third, maybe most of the businesses that have been shut down here and elsewhere will not reopen. And he was explaining to his daughter how, who's pre-med student, very bright girl. Mm-hmm. You would think that she's bright. How this was so disastrous for the economy. And her response was, "Why do you care about the economy?" She's not unique. That's the whole problem with an entire generation of ignoramuses. Excuse me, she's a very sweet girl. I've met her. Very sweet girl. But she's an idiot. She's absolutely unaware, because of her indoctrination, that business pays for everything. There is no government. There is no military.
There's no government money.
There's nothing without business. Business pays for everything. There's no pharmaceuticals. There's no healthcare system. There's no welfare. There's no food stamps. There's no entitlement. There are no police. There are no courts.
No roads, no plumbing, no electricity.
No roads, no electricity, nothing
no water.
Without business. Yeah, you don't even have clean water. Without business, you have nothing. And you have these liberal governors who shut it down. And what you have is people in such aggressive denial. It's far worse than telling a Muslim that, the Quran's the dumbest book ever written. Muhammad was a sexual pervert. Why in the world are you listening to him? He was a rapist and a pedophile. You tell a Muslim that. It's truthful. It's undeniable. The Quran says it. So does the Hadith.
Yeah.
They just go ballistic. If you tell a liberal, one of those that's supportive of the lockdowns and the deprivation of freedoms and the attack on businesses, as well as the riots taking place across the country with Black Lives Matter, the truth about any one of these things, they go ballistic.
Yeah.
Can't process it. We have reached the end. It's irreversible. We are in the midst of the collapse of civil society. It's over.
Yeah.
We will never return. It wasn't, I'm not trying to suggest that we should have been trying to make America great again, because America really was never great. It was the freest, least racist nation on earth where people were given the greatest opportunity to succeed regardless of their ethnicity or anything else for that matter.
Yes.
But that great experiment has now failed.
It's over now. Yeah.
It is over. So anyway, that is our reality. I had collected copious amounts of data from lots of Department of Justice sites and analysis and news stories, and I was going to actually spend a considerable part of this program doing that. Maybe I'll do it next week.
Okay.
But I spent the time translating instead. I ran into something today that fundamentally changes the way that people observe the Shabbat. It's not a change for me, but then again, I very seldom express how I observe the Shabbat. So for me, it is business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
But for the rest of the world, what I came across as I was translating Bereshit 2 today changes the perspective we should all have on the Shabbat. Let me read it to you. Thereby the universe and the spiritual realm, as well as the material realm and the earth, were being completed, prepared such that they would conclude as intended, including all spiritual messengers and heavenly implements. Now, before I go on and read 2:2, you're familiar with conjugations in Hebrew, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have the perfect and the imperfect. What's the difference between the perfect and the imperfect?
One is completed and done, and one is ongoing.
Mm-hmm. So, if this was to say that God had completed, He had finished His work.
Yes.
If that was how this should have been rendered, what conjugation would have to be applied to kala, which is the word for to complete, to accomplish? What conjugation?
Well, it would have to be perfect to be completed.
Correct. It wasn't
one
perfect.
And done, if you like. Yeah, it was
right.
imperfect.
It wasn't the perfect. It was the imperfect. There's also a subtlety. It was the puel stem, which means that
Mm-hmm.
The ongoing influence would be passive, which is interesting. So it was, they were being completed, were being completed. Now, this is going to be the seventh day. I mean, this is the seventh day. We're being completed. That means there was being stuff done. Excuse the poor grammar, but I was trying to make a point.
Mm-hmm. Noted.
Everything being accomplished as designed, ongoing activity on behalf of God. Then it also says, including all of the spiritual messengers and heavenly implements, the Sabbath. What's interesting there is why would God even mention them? I mean, everything so far has been the heavens and the earth, right? The spiritual realm and the material realm. Why did He throw in, at this point, the Sabbath, which are the vast array of spiritual messengers and heavenly implements designed to convey God's message and to interact in lesser dimensions? Why would He bring them up? Does anybody ever?
Obviously, you're going to continue on. Not to now.
Because the fact is, God's not done.
Yeah.
And He has to have a way to interact the spiritual and the material realms. And because He's a seven-dimensional being, there's only two ways for Him to do that. One is through the malach, which comprise the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
The other is through the set-apart spirit.
Yes.
That's it. So he is explaining that I'm not done yet, and the tools that I'm going to use to accomplish this are in the Sabbath. The second reason he mentions Sabbath is because we're introduced in the next statement to one of the most intriguing words in the whole of the Torah, malaka. The Hebrew word malak.
Mm-hmm. The malak, the messengers, or they're also the spirit. These are the guys we're talking about. Yeah.
Right, the malak. So malaka is malak with an ah at the end of it, a hey at the end of it.
Makes it
so
feminine.
How is malaka different than malak?
Well, it'd be the feminine manifestation.
That is correct.
The feminine word with a hey at the end.
Malak is a masculine noun, and malaka is feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So, because of the fact that the religious have wanted to imply that the Shabbat was about ceasing one's work and God not doing any work and God resting, malaka, which is the feminine manifestation of Yahweh's spiritual implements and spiritual heavenly messenger, the set-apart spirit, if you will, in this case, because she's feminine, they have, for reasons that make no sense, rendered malaka as work when it is simply malak. No one denies that. In the feminine, which means if it is work, it's the work of the spiritual implements and heavenly messengers. Now, it's singular, so it is one spiritual implement and heavenly messenger who happens to be feminine. And therefore, it's the set-apart spirit. Yeah, therefore, it's the set-apart spirit. So, Sabbath was being introduced here so we would understand the meaning of malaka. Therefore, during the seventh day, God, and every English translation says either ceased or rested.
Yes.
The word, however, again, is kala. So it means, so God was completing and accomplishing as he was determined to fulfill kala, his work pertaining to the maternal aspects of his message, his expenditure of feminine energy, and his maternal work, which by way of this relationship he had engaged in and would accomplish. So he was observing the Shabbat. Now, everyone will tell you, if you look at an English Bible, so he was resting, so he ceased. But
not
Shabbat,
if he's working.
If God wanted to say that he settled everything that he had to accomplish, and now he was resting, the Hebrew word is nuach. There is absolutely no association linguistically of any kind between Shabbat and cease or rest. And I don't think it shares a single letter in common with nuach. In fact, I know it doesn't. Shabbat and nuach. But what Shabbat shares a lot of letters with are Shabbat, 7, Sheba, the promise, an oath to abundantly enrich, with Shama, with Shamar. Those are words that it shares letters with, but not with nuach. Beyond that, it's also written in the imperfect. It's ongoing. So God was observing the Shabbat, celebrating the promise of 7, and reflecting on that which would be abundantly satisfied. It has to be written such that the verbs are ongoing. Reflect, did, but reflecting would be abundantly satisfying during the seventh day because of Malakah, his divine endeavors as the heavenly messenger, the communication through the effort of the Spirit, which to show the benefits of the relationship he had engaged in and would accomplish. So how about those tamales?
So much for resting.
So much for the feast, and God was worn out and needed a siesta.
Poor guy, he was had this.
And no siesta here. No siesta, no rest, no nap. In the Quran it says, and Allah did not rest on the seventh day because he wasn't tired. Thank you, Satan, for that insight. Yahweh's not resting. He's not stopped. It's ongoing activity. God has lots to do. It was also interesting that the stem associated with Kala, when it's now being applied to the Malakah, because the first time Kala was being used that relation to the spiritual and material realms, and it said it was the puel, which was means that the ongoing interaction would be passive. Well, now the stem, if it were passive, then it would completely screw up this conclusion that God is continuing to work through the set-apart spirit, because he would not do so passively because it's part of his nature. And sure enough, the stem that is being used when it's being applied to Malakah is the peel. And the peel stem is active. Yeah, and it's out of state. It's the peel stem says that as a result of what God was doing, that the Malakah would carry out that action. She receives the action of the verb, the effect of the verb. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's a very intensive activity.
Yeah. What you can learn if you don't just gloss over the words, and if you are willing to say, I'm just not going to write that Shabbat means cease, because every lexicon says it means cease.
So.
Now, if you read the theological workbook of the Old Testament, it's kind of interesting if you read that one, because it will actually present scholarly debate. One of the things I like about it, things I don't like about it always tries to promote the Christian viewpoint because it's published by a Christian company. But nonetheless, it will present scholarly debate. And with Shabbat, the verbal form, it says that there's lots of debate here, and there is absolutely no validation for the assumption that the word means to cease, that there's no linguistic connection of it, and that scholars are perplexed as to why they even went that way, other than in the instruction written as the first of seven instructions, but the fourth statement on the tablets, first on the second tablet. God talks about the Shabbat, and he actually uses nuach in it, along with the verbal form of Shabbat. But there is no reason to translate Shabbat, which is indistinguishable from the noun Shabbat, as anything other than the actionable form of the Shabbat. So it would be Shabbating. And since Shabbating isn't really a word, you would say that it means, in the verbal form, to observe, to celebrate, to experience. the Shabbat.
And participate.
And you can do that in a lot of ways. And God wants us to take an active role in doing that, which means that that's a good day to make special, because God made it special. He set it apart. Not to do your ordinary work. It's a good day not to give your employees the day off, and it's a good day for you to actively pursue the relationship with God, to reflect on what He has done and to celebrate what He's promised to do. So it's a much more active concept than let's not push the button on the elevator because that's a rabbinical rule. Christians despise the Shabbat because it's a Jewish thing, and if you say that you're observing the Shabbat, a Christian will look at you like you Jesus killer. And if you're a Jew, you make this horrible, twisted, torturous game of it. And if you're a Muslim, this is the day that you go hone your terrorist skills. So it's not well understood that God adored it, blessed it, set it apart as being special, and took an active role in it. Anyway, that's my controversy for today, is Shabbating as an ongoing event. We were concluding Dode's last words, and we can conclude that, and then we're going to turn to one of the most misunderstood and highly contested of all prophecies because of the way that the pronouns you and he are used in it. So here's the last of Dode's last words. It says, "Indeed, my house is not appropriate, neither fitting nor proper with God." So here's Dode having the most extraordinary of all homes for the age, best location. In real estate, they say, it's all location. Yeah. Dode had the location. In the location. I mean, Yisrael was the most important place in the world to God. Yep. Yahowah was the most important place in Israel. Jerusalem was the most important place in Yahowah. And Moriah was the most important place in Jerusalem, and Zion was the most important place on Moriah. And that's where Dode was. He had the prime location. And yet he's saying that his house was neither fitting nor proper for God. Why? Because the covenant is extraordinary. Covenant. Home is 7 dimensions. It's in the spiritual realm. It's got the greatest view in the world. It has the most enlightened people, opportunity. And so Dode's recognizing this. And he says, and yet by contrast, he has constituted and facilitated an everlasting family covenant relationship for me. Dode is making the connection. It's not about the family of man. It's about the family of God. It's not the size of our home here on earth, but the home of the covenant in Shamayim. I got a really nice email from one of my least favorite idiots this prior week, posted on a number of sites that said that a number of things. One is that, okay, so Craig's a really good translator, but so is Satan. Compared to Satan, that's always fun. In fact, I didn't know that Satan translates personally, but nonetheless, I guess he does. And it says, Craig's not even covenant because he pays attention to, looks at mainstream news sources. The conspiratorial types are just up at a Twitter over fake news. And so because you pay attention to, and believe mainstream media, so Craig's not covenant. Not only is there no criterion in the covenant not to read mainstream news sources. Last time I checked, I was among the first to aggressively expose and condemn the mainstream media. And what I wrote, even in my first book, In the Company of Good and Evil, is that if you are an expert on any subject and you read what is written or hear what is said in the mainstream media regarding almost any event that you have expertise in, and you realize that the majority of what is being said is untrue. Just untrue. And it was a combination of the people doing the writing. Got good grades in English and journalism school, but they have no exposure to the things they're covering. They know nothing of business. They know nothing of economics. They know nothing of, if they're speaking of airplanes, they know nothing of flight. No matter the subject. They lack the knowledge necessary to tell the truth, and they would much prefer to shade everything towards their politically correct liberal agenda, and they do. So I was, by personal exposure, among the first to say, the vast majority of what you read and hear in the media is not true, and continue to say that. So you have to have a tremendous filter. The second thing is when I report on something like I've gone after our response to the coronavirus and to Black Lives Matter, I always use irrefutable sources. I won't cite somebody's podcast who says that right now they're blaming Jacob Blake of being a pedophile. And so you could find 1,000 bits of news out there saying that he was a pedophile. It's just not true. Yeah, he is wanted for sexual assault. But the woman's not underage. There's absolutely no evidence of him being a pedophile. I won't do that. If I read something and say, boy, that just sounds like it doesn't pass the smell test, I'll go and fact check it. And my preference is to, like, for example, watching what's happening in the inner cities and watching the nature to try to understand this monster that's become Black Lives Matter. I'll watch the videos. I'll listen to what they have to say in the videos. I'll play scores of them. As much as I hate watching videos, you need to have a first-hand witness, and that's what they provide. You don't need any commentary. Just watch. You watch the number of times that 4 or 5 black youths will just randomly pick a white guy standing in a gas station or walking out of a store and beat the crap out of him. I mean, kick him when he's down, to bash him in the head with a rock, and I mean, it's animalistic behavior. So anyway, that is my preference. But nonetheless, I'm not covenant because I must believe news sources. The third was that I can't be covenant because I'm a hypocrite, because I said that Black Lives Matter is a conspiracy, and I won't believe any of their conspiracies, like chemtrails or building 7 of the World Trade Center, or reptilian overlords, or political actors. Matter of fact, you know that the conspirators, the idiots that we disassociated with, that were claiming to be covenant while promoting conspiracy, that they're now saying that coronavirus is all a hoax. There's no such thing. It's a hoax to control people. Now, it is being used to control people, but the virus
it's real. It kills.
No. Yes, it's legal. And they're saying that Black Lives Matter, too, that they're all government protesters. It's all staged. Now, this is worldwide. Millions of people. But no, it's all staged. There really are no real protests. And so what I came to realize is that Black Lives Matter manifests every aspect of a conspiracy. These are people who are saying the opposite of what's true, that they are promoting a means of projecting an excuse for their miserable lives, that their lives, either they're being killed en masse, they're not successful, and so even though society has done everything it can to provide for this community, their situation is miserable. And so rather than accept responsibility, rather than say that the liberal approach has failed, like every conspiracy, they have to blame someone else for their miserable lives. And so, and on top of that, the agenda for Black Lives Matter is to impose communism, destroy free enterprise. And so it is, in every respect, acting like a conspiracy. To expose something as a conspiracy and to promote a conspiracy are very different things. To promote the conspiracy of chemtrails, or that vaccines are a government plot, or to promote the notion that the virus is not real, then you are promoting a conspiracy. It is not you are not being conspiratorial to say that the conspiracies against vaccines, the conspiracy against airplane exhaust, the conspiracy against what happened in Building 7 and 9/11. That's exactly the opposite. But that's how far we've fallen. It's people have absolutely lost their ability to think. And if you can't make these connections, then you have no chance of engaging in a productive relationship. And that was the thing that made Dode special. Dode was exceedingly knowledgeable and probably as rational as anyone who had ever lived. And so it is this combination of knowledge and understanding that caused Dode to say, and yet by contrast, he has constituted and facilitated an everlasting family covenant relationship for me. Now, some might say, well, wait a minute. This is supposed to be, divine writ. This is supposed to be an inspired prophet revealing himself revealing Yahweh to humankind. This is supposed to be, this is the guy that Yahweh declared is the Messiah. Oh, by the way, they claim that this same idiot that wrote is that Jesus is the real Messiah and not Dode. Well, that would be news to God, since God says scores
David
of times
and Yosha.
that Dode is the Messiah, and he never once says that Yosha is the Messiah. But oh well.
It's impossible for Yosha to be the Messiah.
Why is Dode writing about this personally? Why is he saying that God created an everlasting family covenant relationship for me? He doesn't say for us. He doesn't say for you. He says for me.
You personalize it, just like you should, like I should.
Absolutely. Dode knew.
If we're going to read and recite something, Craig, we're going to read and recite something. If anything, it ought to be our personal claim here. So you put it in terms that that's exactly what you have.
I get flack from time to time because when I read the prophecies regarding the Towrah and specifically what was said about Yada, it became obvious to me that I am the embodiment of what God was saying he was going to do and the reason he was going to do it. And that's not an honor because the choder is an insignificant stem. And based upon what is said about this individual, the spirit has to essentially do everything, which means that on his own he's
he is a goy.
Right above an income. Maybe smarter than the average goy, but from God's point of view, that's not saying much. He needs a lot of help. But what did I always say when God was telling us all of the ways that he was going to have, the 7 ways really that he was going to have his spirit inspire and enable and enlighten the choder? I said, apply it to yourself.
Yeah.
Claim it for yourself. When we were reading the 91st Psalm, and I said, the 91st Psalm is the reason I'm here. Yahowah spoke to me and said, I want you to do this. And I said, no, come on. Not qualified, not interested. And oh, by the way, in case you haven't noticed, anybody that's ever attempted to do this is dead. So, no, I don't want to do this. Yeah, no.
Oh, by the way.
Oh, by the way. So, we have a discussion, and, I asked for a number of things, and God says, okay, I'll do that, no problem. And I said, well, how do I really know that, Gideon, tell me about the fleece. How do I really know that it's you? And he said, well, reach into your pocket. Stupid. Reach my pocket. And there's the 91st Psalm where God is specifically saying, oh, yeah, I'm going to do each of the 3 things that I promised, and more. And so when we were covering it, what did I say? Apply it to yourself.
Yeah.
Promises in the 91st Mizmor Psalm are extraordinary. Apply them to yourself. Every time we hear Dode say something like, and by contrast, he has constituted and fashioned an everlasting family covenant relationship for me, how should we respond to that?
Read it the same way.
Yourself. Yeah, apply it to yourself. That's the reason it's there. Dode is the living exemplar of the covenant. He created the covenant for each of us. He would have done it if, Kirk, you were the only person on earth. He'd have done it.
Sad.
It would be. Yeah, eternity, Yahowah, I am certain, is highly entertaining, and eternity with Yahowah would be a lot of fun. But even Yahowah said, hey, I tried that with Adam, and, it wasn't as good as I had hoped it was going to be, and so I gave Adam Chawa, and, that didn't turn out so good either. But
that free will
more
thing.
The merrier. Yeah, free will thing, but... Yeah, we're being facetious here, but the fact of the matter is that part of the reason that heaven's going to be and eternity is going to be interesting is because of all the interesting people that we're all going to bring our own unique quirks, and we had to bring our quirks, right?
And quirks, yeah.
Quirks and quirks. and probably even a quirk or two.
Yeah, maybe a quirk or two. What the hell?
Yeah. So, Dode is the example we should all be following. We can follow Dode. That's the cool thing about it. Dude wasn't perfect.
No.
Dude's family was all screwed up. His family was more screwed up than mine or yours or most everyone's. He really had a screwed up family. That's why he's saying, hey, my home's not right with God. His eldest son raped his daughter. His third son killed his youngest son for doing it. And then he went off and led a rebellion against his father. And was killed during that rebellion.
I mean, you can't have had the most amazing marriage in the history of marriages if it takes 8 of them. Somewhere along the way, wasn't satisfied, and on top of that, you wouldn't have 10 concubines. So, I mean, Dowd made some terrific mistakes. Remember the time that God gave him 3 options as to
he chose the worst.
Yeah, and he chose the worst.
The
most selfish and the worst.
Yes.
And the consequence was grievous. Remember the time he just longed for the taste of the water from a spring in Bethlehem, and he sent
people's
some
lives
men down to get a cup of it, and realized how horrible that it was that he'd put his men at risk, and he threw the water out when it arrived, saying, "Oh, I can't be doing this." It got so bad with Saul that Dowd went over to the Philistines, and he wanted to go to battle with them one time against Israel. It took a Philistine to say, "Hey, no. No. And even with toward the end of his life, this is Yahweh's son. This is the Son of God. This is the Messiah. This is the branch. This
King of Kings.
This is the shepherd. This is the King of Kings. This is the guy that's going to come back and be king forever.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Set up his kingdom again.
So this is an extraordinary guy, and yet toward the end of his life, he had weakened his relationship with Yahweh to the point that Nathan, the prophet, was an intermediary. So the fact of the matter is that with all of your flaws and my flaws and our aches and pains in our lives, we can follow Dowd.
Yes, we can.
Now, it'd be pretty stupid for us to try to follow Yosha, because he was the Passover lamb. That would not turn out well.
Yeah. He was perfect,
we can sure as heck
turns out poorly. Yeah.
Right. Isn't the whole idea of a shepherd for the sheep to follow that shepherd?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dowd's the shepherd.
Yes.
It is properly ordered and suitably structured in every way and readily observable, because this is the totality of my freedom and salvation, in addition to everything I desire. Dowd has come to realize what we have said for some time, that there is nothing more important than being part of the covenant.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that he desires, to be part of the covenant. Because if you're part of the covenant, you inherit all that God has to offer. You become immortal. You become perfected. You're enriched. You're empowered. Enlightened. You become God's kid. You get to live with Yahweh forever in eternity. What more could you ask? What more could you want?
Yeah.
And Dowd is also realizing that this is essentially his Yasha. And that is more freedom than salvation, but it includes both. That is the beauty of it, is that we are not restricted. When you're part of the covenant family, you're free. The Torah exists not to control you, but to liberate you. That's why God introduces himself as, I am Yahweh, who liberated you from bondage and oppression, being slaves and Mitzrayim. He is our liberator, not our oppressor. He's not a Lord to obey, but a Father who delivers us from harm's way. And Dowd recognized that. So here's Dowd ending his last words to God. Said, all that matters is that I'm part of your covenant family. It's all I've ever wanted. It's all I care about. I'm part of your covenant family. I would say the same thing.
Yeah, we too. That's very
yeah.
Makes you swell up, then it kind of teary-eyed there.
Yeah. Will he not cause it to branch out and grow? We're in this passage because at this point in the
this is the third volume now of Observation, third chapter of the third volume of Observations, and the rewrite of it. And by the way, all of the observations, all 5 volumes now are available at Amazon for those that wish to have a hard copy, a printed version of it. They really are attractive. Jackie did a marvelous job, and the whole team that did the editing, they're so much easier to read. The print, the font is larger now. The margins are properly set and wide. The spacing is appropriate. The content has been completely rewritten and edited. These books are really wonderful. I feel very good about giving them to people, including also the 2 for Coming Home. But right now, I think there are 8 volumes that are available through Amazon. It's going to take a while for the first volume of Yada Yahweh because I'm rewriting everything from the translations to the conclusions and the insights derived from them. So I'm about 400 pages into volume 1 at this point, but there's a lot. There's a lot to go, and Yada Yahweh. So we're here because we were trying to understand who's the branch and what does it mean. Shamak, the Hebrew word for branch. There's a number of Hebrew words for branch, but that's the one that resonates prophetically. And it's applied more to Dode than it is to anyone else. That Dode is the branch. And that is a metaphor that Yahweh uses, and it's a symbol, it's a title that Yahweh uses more than he uses Mashiach. You know, the world is so fixated on Mashiach because Christians have claimed that Jesus was the Messiah and therefore the Christ. Mm-hmm. And, you know, while that's not true, and Dode is, the fact is that and we know that Mashiach is never applied once prophetically to Yosha, and it is applied countless times to Dode. That the fact is that's not the primary title that Yahweh applies to Dode. You know, he calls Dode the Son of God, and Yosha is the Son of Man. But he only says that a few times. He calls, he specifically instructed Dode to be anointed as the Messiah 3 times and refers to him as the Messiah a score of times. But he uses branch far more often. He calls Dode his shepherd. He calls Dode the King of Kings, says that Dode's the one who will be participating in the second coming. But he says all of those things anywhere from once or twice or 5 or 6 or 15 to 20 times. But he uses branch even more. It's a dominant metaphor, far more often than shepherd. And so we have to wonder, well, why? The Christian wants their Jesus to be the Son of God, and yet, Yosha never referred to himself as the Son of God. He referred to himself as the Son of Man. He's in prophecy, he's the Son of Man. And Dode is clearly the Son of God. And yet, with all the power of that, the primary title for Dode is the branch. So what is it about branch that God wants to resonate with us even more than Son of God, even more than Messiah, even more than King of Kings, even more than Shepherd, even more than Joseph? There's a huge part of it. Also, God began this story by talking about 2 trees. There's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is not a bad thing. No. It's a good thing. It's good to know. It's good to understand. You have to know to understand. And so Dode is the best when it comes to knowing and understanding. And the second tree was the tree of lives. Well, the person who produced the fruit of understanding, of knowledge of what is right and wrong, and Dode provides plenty of both, is Dode. And the ultimate branch off the tree of lives is Dod. And so Dod is the branch because the branch is the tree that is rooted in the truth, rooted in the Torah, the source of life, the source of knowledge leading to understanding. So he said, and he will cause it to branch out and grow. He will cause the relationship to stretch out and thrive, greatly increasing. This was Samuel. Listen to him, 2 Samuel 23:5. So what I'd like to do now is to turn to what is a prophecy that, boy, I bet we've already covered 3 or 4 times. And every time we cover it, we learn more, and I want to jump back into it. It's a challenging one to understand because of the change in pronouns as to who God is speaking of. So it begins, indeed, when your days are complete, he's speaking to Dod, when your days are male, fulfilled, and you lie down with your fathers, I will take a stand with your offspring after you, which to show the way shall come out, physical being. Well, Dod is the father of Solomon, who reigned over a united Israel, who actually built the house of Yahweh. He's also the one that gave the speech about the Nakri, about a foreigner.
And mention you.
Yeah, right at the consecration of the house of Yahweh. About how in the later days that this individual, a foreigner who was observant, was known as Yada, was going to convey a message that Israel needed to listen to and needed to respond to, because he would be using those words to call Yahweh's people home. And so there's a lot that was made possible through Dod's descendants. And Yosha was a descendant of Dod as well. And Yosha is the one that opened the door to heaven. He opened the door with life. He's the Passover lamb, and exceedingly important in that role. So indeed, when your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, I will take a stand with your offspring after you. And you could also say Zerah. Zerah is not just offspring and descendants, but the seeds that you sow.
Zerah. That you plant.
Seed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And so I will take a stand with the seeds that you sow after you. What are the seeds that Dod sowed?
Well, his words that produce fruit. Yeah.
Right. The Mashal, Proverbs, the Mizmor, Psalms.
Gosh, 1,000
words. Words like this from the prophets, particularly Samuel. I will take a stand with the seeds that you sow after you, which to show the way shall come out of your physical being. And I will establish accordingly his kingdom. So his kingdom here could be Solomon's kingdom, which he did. God establishes Solomon's kingdom. It could be Dod's kingdom. Why? Well, because God is going to establish Dod's kingdom. What do you think? How many prophecies does God have to say that when he returns, he's returning with Dod and going to establish the kingdom of Dod forever?
It's all over the place.
But what it cannot be is Jesus' kingdom.
No, he doesn't have a kingdom. That's not a slant.
Yeah, because
that's not his role.
Yeah.
Over it.
He most certainly wasn't the king when he was here.
No.
And he's not returning. Passover lamb does not.
No.
So it's Dowd that's returning, not Jesus. And that Jesus was not ever a king. And therefore, and the kingdom that God is reestablishing is clearly Dowd's. So this is one of those things that is true of Solomon, and it's true of Dowd. And God, speaking in first person, can speak of Dowd because, he's speaking through the prophet Nathan. Mm-hmm. And so he can use his speaking of Dowd and his speaking of Solomon. I think he's speaking primarily of Dowd, but understand that God's establishing a father-son relationship here. And so for Dowd to be the example for us to follow, we see Dowd establishing a father-son relationship, with his son Solomon.
Sure.
So, indeed, when your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, I will take a stand with your offspring after you, which to show the way shall come out of your physical being, and I will establish accordingly his kingdom. We took some time to go back over the 23rd Mizmor Psalm, because what I found is that right in the heart of it, when he's talking about because Yahweh is with him, the pronoun changes from first person to third person. Still the same person giving the talk, still the same God, still the same interaction, but Dowd goes from speaking of God and first person to third person. And it's the reason for that is that it's helpful for us to understand that Dowd had this personal relationship with Yahweh, and yet everything he's saying about Yahweh applies to us so that we can see ourselves, project ourselves into that scene. And so it is not uncommon for pronouns to change mid-thought. A difference in the way that Hebrew is communicated. And he shall build the family home for my name. So he again, the family home for Yahweh's name, the Bana Beyeth, was actually constructed by Solomon. Correct?
Solomon.
So he can still be speaking of Solomon. But Dowd's last words, and you have created an everlasting covenant relationship, family home for me. They did it together, didn't they? So it could also be speaking of Dowd, and you shall build a family for my name. That was what Dowd did better than anything else. He established the family for Yahweh's name. And I will establish accordingly the throne of his kingdom forever and ever as a continuing witness ad olam. Now, you only have one option. So there were two, Solomon and Dowd, with it looking like it was more Dowd than Solomon, but there was still the father and son tie-in.
Outside, yeah.
And now you're dealing with, and there's only one
no doubt now.
Because God has very clearly said that he is going to establish the kingdom of Dowd, not the kingdom of Solomon, not the kingdom of Yoshua/Jesus. He's going to create and establish the kingdom of Dowd. And God said, if it isn't true, you can call me a liar. So we are clearly dealing with a prophecy that speaks of Dowd. I will establish his kingdom forever
and ever as a continuing witness. Upon this rock, I will build my invitations to be called out. We recognize that Dod refers to Dod refers to Yahweh as the rock of his freedom and salvation. Does so often. So the rock of our salvation is Yahweh. Dod says that Yahweh is his shepherd. And Yahweh says that Dod is his shepherd. So Dod says that Yahweh is the rock. Yahweh says Dod is the rock. That's the nature of their relationship. So this is Yahweh speaking. If it was Dod speaking, and if you said, upon this rock I will build, or I will establish, or I will restore the invitations to be called out, the Mikre, we'd have no problem with that. But it's God speaking.
Mm-hmm.
When God speaking of this rock, this sewer, I will build my invitations to be called out. He's speaking of Dod, the person who explained as an eyewitness Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim is Dod. That's the 22nd and 88th Mizmor.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dod is the rock upon which Yahweh's invitations to be called out were built. And if you were to say, oh, you're speaking of Jebus here, no, because the only only Mikra that Yosha participated in was Pesach. It was Yahweh's soul that went into Sheol.
They went into Sheol and Matzah, yeah.
Right. It was the set-apart spirit that extracted him. It was the set-apart spirit that reunited with Yahweh's soul for Bikurim. And it was the set-apart spirit that fulfilled Shabuah, enriching and empowering the covenant's children. It's the set-apart spirit that enables the message of Teruah. It is the set-apart spirit that facilitates reconciliation on Kippurim, such that we can camp out with Yahweh. The only one that has a Yosha moment is Pesach.
Pesach, yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's so obvious.
So it couldn't be Mikra, could it? It would have to be one, singular.
Mikra, yeah, it could be one, singular, yes. That's so obvious, there's no debate. To me, what do you debate?
Yes. And then if you were to consider, okay, what about Dod that would, beyond the fact that Dod is chronically the explanation, he's the only eyewitness for Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And if you're going to build benefit from the Moed Mikre, you have to have an eyewitness that explains it. You have to. So the role Dod played for on those three is extraordinary. But also, Dod is the catalyst that enables Kippurim. He's the one calling Yisrael back home. He's the one whose words are reconciling the relationship between Yisrael and Yehudah as he once did. He's the one that united Yehudah and Yisrael. He's doing it again.
So why not the prototype?
And so he is the living embodiment of, he is the means behind Kippurim. Kippurim is being done in conjunction with Dod, which is why Dod is returning with Yahweh, which is why he is the king of the millennial Shabbat. And speaking of Sukkah, who's the king of Sukkah? It's Dod. So Dod is, in fact, the fulfillment of two of the seven Mikre, isn't it? So you can use Mikre, plural, with Dod.
You can't with Yosha.
You can't with Yosha. you could use mikre plural with the set-apart spirit, because the set-apart spirit played the leading role in Bakurim. An important role in matzah, no role whatsoever in Pesach. Important role in matzah, and that she had to retrieve Yahweh's soul from Sheol. So Pesach is only Yosha is the sacrificial lamb. Matzah is Yahweh's soul going into Sheol, plus the set-apart spirit retrieving that soul. And Bakurim is the integration, the total absorption of the spirit of Yahweh upon Yahweh's soul, making that the example of the fulfillment of the firstborn child, such that it was the spirit acting independently that fulfilled Shabbat, to enrich, to empower, to enlighten. And it's the spirit that enables us to be effective witnesses on Towrah, such that Dod is the one acting on Kapurim. Yes, Yahweh is returning, but he's doing everything through Dod. And yes, Yahweh is camping out with us on Sukkah, but all of that is being managed by Dod. It's because that's Yahweh's nature. He wants to work through his creation whenever possible. So Dod qualifies as mikra plural. And I will always be for him as a father, and he shall always exist for me as a son. Did Yahweh and the Torah prophets and Psalms ever refer to Yosha as the Son of God?
Never.
Does Yahweh refer to Dod and say, speaking directly of Dod, naming him and saying, he is my son, I am his father?
Yes.
Absolutely. He's speaking of Dod here and saying, I will actually and always be for him as a father, and he shall always exist for me as a son. Now, the one person that Yahweh said this about, naming him, is Dod. And when Dod said that Yahweh created a family home for him, that's exactly what God is saying. Yeah, I'm his father. He's my son. That's what the covenant is all about. And we ought to look at their relationship and say, well, what is it about Dod that caused God to affirm that Dod was his son forever? That Dod was part of the covenant family forever. That Dod was liberated by God and saved by God.
Yeah. He's always right about you. Yeah. He never twisted any words.
Yeah. He looked at Yahweh's name, was excited to be involved in Yahweh's business, loved sharing what he had learned about Yahweh, testimony. Yahweh's enemies were his enemies.
That's right.
He was openly critical.
Philistine.
Yeah, you scummy Palestinian, you.
Nothing. Yeah.
Take that. And I will actually and always be for him as a father, and he shall exist for me as a son, which through this association and to show the way, with him becoming burdened with perversity, I will resolve the dispute by judging him, accusing him, so as to manifest vindication through him, because of the rods, the weapons, the staves wielded by rulers of nations to punish, kill, and control the tribes and races of mankind, and becomes of the assault and plague that has fallen upon the children of Adam.
Can you say Yahowah?
Yeah. So here we are with God saying that, I'm always going to be a father. He's always going to be my son. And that this relationship is designed to show us the way to benefit from this relationship and to get the most out of life. Asher. And that Dode, by his own admission, was burdened with perversity. He says, I've got more perverse things, more corruptions than I have hairs in my head. That's what makes Dode the perfect exemplar of the Torah, because the Torah exists to perfect the imperfect.
Satisfy that situation. Yeah.
Exactly. So Dode was burdened with perversity. And Yahweh was saying, I'm going to resolve the dispute, judging him, accusing him. And he did. One of the things, Yahweh said, you're not going to build my family home because you've been a man of war.
Nope.
And when Dode arranged to put the husband of a woman that he coveted into harm's way, such that he ended up getting killed, and that he claimed his wife, Bathsheba. Said no, that was not cool. And when Dode made the wrong choice, when he was afraid of being pursued by enemies and made the wrong choice, God held him accountable. That Dode has still been perfected. Dode is still, living with Yahweh in heaven. Dode is still Yahweh's preferred son. But Yahweh was open and honest with us about when he did wrong. And that's important because Yahweh is going to manifest vindication through him, particularly when it comes to the rulers of nations, particularly when it comes to the weapons wielded by nations, particularly because of the plague that has fallen.
Cursed it.
The children of Adam. Plague is religion. The worst plague of all, of course, is Christianity, because it's the most popular religion and because it's the religion that has harmed more Jews for a longer period of time than any other. But it doesn't keep the fact that Judaism is a plague. Islam is a plague. It's a plague that has befallen Adam. And, I was reading about the Communist Party. And the Communist Party is offering now financial incentives for the Chinese to report on anyone that is practicing a religion. And to expose them such that the Chinese government could, of course, go to that individual and send them off to a labor camp or, abuse them in some way. And communist government said is that you ought not believe in your religion. You ought to place your faith in the religion of the Communist Party and believe the leadership of the Communist Party. The religion of man. Yeah. Recently, there was another article out talking about the people that Trump is now targeting in the Chinese Communist Party because of the deprivations of freedoms in Hong Kong. And what we have found is that the higher-ups in the Communist Party and their children and relatives are billionaires. Because the whole scam of communism is that you will take from those the rich and will distribute their wealth, and you will be lavished with the wealth of the rich, and the people will rule, and you won't have to be oppressed by those wealthy people anymore. Well, the fact of the matter is, they do confiscate the wealth of the rich, and because now there's no incentive to be productive,
everybody falls into poverty except communist leaders who become filthy rich. It is the ultimate scam, and it's always been that way, and people just are completely ignorant to it. And so this is part of that plague of that is affecting humankind. You look at the coronavirus. While it is a plague, a pestilence, look at the reaction to the coronavirus and government and politic reaction to it. It is even a greater plague. Look at the plague now of Black Lives Matter. It is this terrible assault and plague that has befallen humankind. And this is something that God is going to deal with. So it's a amazing prophecy. So much to learn by it, and just every time we're given the opportunity to learn about the relationship Dode had with Yahowah, that Yahowah had with Dode, what Yahowah has to say about Dode, the more we recognize what God is looking for, what he respects, what he enjoys, what he appreciates, what he finds pleasing. And, you find a lot of things that this idea of living a chaste life without any sexual missteps is irrelevant to God. It is God's son. Had lots of wives and lots of concubines. Who knows how many women he dated. God didn't care. It's irrelevant to him. What God cares about is our willingness to learn from him, our desire to understand what he has to say, our enthusiasm for his name, our appreciation of the covenant, our willingness to observe the Torah, our desire to participate in the covenant, our intolerance of religion, of those forces which are opposed to God. And so in Dode we see so many of the things that God is interested in. A man that knew what it meant to be a shepherd, to nourish the sheep, to protect the sheep, to live with the sheep, to call the sheep home. And a man that had so many flaws that we can follow him, and yet a man with courage, 8 years old, going up against the mightiest warrior of the day. And not just taking him out, but in Elia fashion, giving him, what do they call it, smack, I think in today's term, smack off. Foul-mouthed, uncircumcised Palestinian. Take this? Who in the hell do you think you are? Bad-mouthing Yahweh and my people. Kaboom. Mm-hmm. Cut off his head and held it up. Said, this is what happens. They got a trash mouth. Speak against God. He was 8 years old. Pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Well, we'll pick up the story this time next week. Kirk, I'm sorry it's been such a tough week for you and for Terry. Hope there are better days ahead. I hope you get some help. Not that that's going to be likely in the People's Republic of California.
Communist California, right?
Yeah. You're going to need a vacation. I know a place to come to get one. Life's not perfect here. But this place is a great place to understand the fallacies of Black Lives Matter. We've talked about it before because it's an entirely black
run operation.
Yeah, everything is a black operation and has been going back scores and scores and scores of years, and yet the murder rate of blacks here is 10 times the rest of the United States. 10 times.
That's tragic.
They're being killed, of course, by blacks. But if Black Lives Matter, and that's what you're trying to protest, well, in a society where the governor is black,
over, it just makes it worse.
Are all black, and all government officials are black, and that you don't even have Caucasian candidates that run against the blacks, and yet the murder rate of blacks is 10 times higher than it is in any other state or territory. You just see the hypocrisy of Black Lives Matter. You know, I saw something the other day, Kurt, that was really unknown to me, and Leah was the one who made it come full circle to me this morning. A lot of times people bring on to themselves what they end up enduring. I shared several programs ago of the angry black woman that I met at Home Depot, octopus arms, her arms straight to the top of her lungs. It's entitled, self-important, belligerent, unintelligent. And, you know, there's the cliche of the angry black woman. And I saw so many videos after it of black women attacking white men and white women in really very hostile, angry ways, physically assaulting them. Come to realize that it is pervasive in the culture. And there are reasons that black men don't stay married to, or don't marry in the first place, black women. Way too many of them are aggressive. I mean, I can't imagine anybody living with this woman that I encountered at Home Depot. But I've heard so many stories since then of similar encounters.
Wow.
They've made themselves such that no one wants to live with them. And there is this propensity in this culture, in this community, to physically assault, having women physically assault men and physically assault their children. And if you were to go in the community and say, you know, that's not right, you can't hit your child. If you hit your child's going to grow up and not only hit you back, but hit others, which is why young black men are 80% more violent than others. And yet they'll say, you know, you shut up and you don't tell me how to
get my child. Yeah.
Well, you shouldn't do that. You know, stop it with the violence. Stop it with the abuse. You know, the abused become abusers. And it's a boy, when you immerse yourself, I did this past week in the statistics of what's happening in the black community. It's devastating, and the problem is the black community. It's not the idiot that shot Jacob Blake in the back. It's what made Jacob Blake Jacob Blake. It's what caused him to have sexually assaulted the mother of his children who was not married to. It's what caused him to walk into the bar and point his gun at to people to attack the cop and the cop tried to break it up. It's what caused him to resist arrest and threaten the cops with a knife. You know, it's what caused George Floyd to be a drug addict. It's what caused him to resist arrest. It caused him, when he had coronavirus, not to wear a mask, exposing others to that deadly virus. It would cause him to commit not only armed robbery, but to pistol whip the victim that he was robbing. it is what causes blacks to be the murderer 90% of the time, 93% of the time that a black is killed. It's what causes the fact that if a black murders, they disproportionately single out whites. When whites, to an overwhelming extent, only kill other whites. There's a problem in the community. And until we address the problems in the community and we point the finger where it rightly belongs, we're just going to make matters worse. We're creating excuses for bad behavior and justifying riots and looting. And yet the world's blind to it, and people are celebrating it to the point where, I watched the opening ceremony of a soccer game where every player got down on their knees and support Black Lives Matter. Do you think they all supported it, or do you think that we're now in a position where...
it's peer pressure.
Where the pressure is that you can't, if you were the lone person that stood up because you don't support what they're doing, and you shouldn't support what they're doing. Yeah. You'll be attacked.
You better be like Joe if you're going to stand up.
Right. Right. And all the money that Black Lives Matter, hundreds of millions of dollars that this communist organization, this anti-Semitic organization has raised. They haven't built a single food kitchen in the black community. They haven't established any guidance center to help African Americans take responsibility. They haven't opened any school in the African American community. They haven't built housing in the African American community. Haven't fed a single child. Haven't housed a single orphan. Haven't come up with an alternative to the police. Nothing. They take the money. They under aliases donate to the Democrats because the Democrats are protecting them. Now, I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but he's right in saying you will not be safe if Biden's elected. He's right.
Yeah.
It's painful to admit that he's right, but he's right in that regard. This is an organization that has done nothing to help the African American community. Nothing. A bunch of hypocrites. Because that's not their agenda. Their agenda is communism. Control. Yep.
God, it just seems so soon.
It
too early.
Seems so soon. Yeah, I know. Well, with the human experience since the expulsion from the garden 6,000 years, we're only now 13 years away from Dod's and Yahweh's return. We're only a matter of 10 years away from the worst part of Jacob's troubles, where the world is unrecognizable. And so, that close to it over the chasm of the human experience, no, it's really not too so. We're just witnessing all of this materialize before our eyes.
I know.
And, the fires, the coronavirus, the Black Lives Matters looting and rioting, the deprivation of freedoms, restrictions on livelihood, the destruction of economies worldwide, these terrible storms, all part of it.
I keep having this vision of the Khrushchev in the United Nations on that little desk, taking off his shoes, saying, "We'll bury you." Damn.
Yeah. Well, actually, they buried themselves.
I know. But
so did we. We both buried ourselves. We didn't need Khrushchev to bury us, and he didn't.
Let me buy you
survive.
that shovel, pal.
Yeah. So they buried themselves. We buried ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was right and wrong. And he was right about the burying part.
Yeah,
but not
who's buried.
Not who would do it. So
it's not the we, it's to us.
Yeah.
How sick.
Right.
How sick.
Well, you have a better week. Look forward to being with you next week. May God bless. Happy Shabbat.
Yes.
And active Shabbat. To one. And
active Shalom. Yeah. Well, we started off. That's good. That's good.
Good night.
All righty, buddy. Take care. Bye-bye.